Welcome to the Prospect League Podcast, the podcast for the past, present, and future of the Prospect League, the home of elite college baseball players from across the country. I'm Lucas Burris, back for another episode of the Prospect League Podcast, episode 3 already of the Prospect League Podcast. Couldn't be more excited to be back as we are just racing closer to the start of the Prospect League season, opening day May 31st. We're continuing to go through all the exciting stuff here in the Prospect League Podcast, continuing to look towards what our history was, and we're going to do so again this week. But if you've stopped by here and you haven't checked out our first 2 episodes of the Prospect League Podcast, check those out. Warren Morris, Commissioner David Brower, both really exciting interviews. Warren Morris, of course, that very famous home run for LSU in the 1996 College World Series, as our commissioner had some exciting things to say as well about his love for baseball. So David Brower, Warren Morris, those former interviews, they're available on the podcast platform or on YouTube, wherever you're watching and listening to this. So if you haven't checked out this coming up interview that we're about to get to, make sure you do so. You stop by and check out those ones after you have listened or watched this one, because as you probably know, if you've clicked on this video or clicked on this podcast, you know where we're headed here. You know who the interview this week. So let's talk about our guest this week. Let me introduce another exciting alumni joining me this week as former MLB pitcher, former Illinois State pitcher, and former Quincy Gems pitcher, Neal Cotts, is joining me this week on the Prospect League Podcast. Neal Cotts is a 10-year Major League Baseball veteran, having spent time with the White Sox, Cubs, Rangers, Twins, and Brewers from 2001 to 2017. He's a 2005 World Series champion with the Chicago White Sox, an Illinois State Athletics Hall of Famer, and a 2-year veteran of the CICL with those 2 years with the Quincy Gems in 1999 and 2000. Let's head straight to it. Let's get to our interview this week with our guest, Neal Cotts. Neal Cotts, welcome to the Prospect League Podcast.
Hey, nice for you guys to have me this afternoon, and I'm excited to be here.
I think the listeners will be excited as well, and maybe you'll do better than our first few podcasts. I think that's where we're looking at right now, more of a competition to see which MLB and Prospect League alumni can get into it. But I'm going to jump right in. First question, just a little background. You left Major League Baseball 2017. What is Neal Cotts up to these days?
These days I'm chasing my kids around a little bit with their sports and activities. I have a sixth grader and an 8th grader. So 6th graders in soccer, 8th graders in baseball and football. So I do a little bit of some baseball training with some buddies of mine that I grew up with through college, and work there, coach some teams, do some private lessons, all kinds of that stuff in the baseball world. And then, just be a dad and watch a lot of games.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of retired MLB players say the same thing. It's playing the game of baseball, retiring, and focusing on the kids. But how connected do you think you're staying to the game of baseball at the college and professional levels? I know you're doing some developmental work. I know you're looking at your kids in the league and high school, but how much are you staying connected to the game that you were connected for a long time?
Quite a bit. I mean, I'm in our facility we run up here is named Slammers. I'm in here in there daily, almost at least 5 days a week, between working with kids and staying in shape a little bit myself and everything else. So I'm definitely involved in it. I'm probably not involved in it in terms of the professional level in any aspects, but developing. I deal with kids anywhere from 10 years old to I have a couple kids that are trying to, well, they're not kids now, men trying to play independent ball and trying to keep their career going. So it's exciting. I enjoy. I've seen myself watch baseball a lot more recently than I did when I first retired. But I definitely enjoy the game. So I enjoy watching the game. I enjoy teaching the game.
And that takes us right to, one of my favorite questions to ask is what initially drew you to the game of baseball, and in talking about, why you decided you were going to play baseball and that was going to be your career, and what keeps bringing you back to baseball as well, because it's just such an interesting game and the game that we love. So what brought you there initially, and what keeps bringing you back to the game of baseball?
Well, I mean, I grew up in a pretty small town down in Southern Illinois. So I was able compared to up here, I was able to do everything from the age of 5 till even through high school. I never had to pick a sport, which was a benefit. And really nice. So I played basketball, I played baseball, I played soccer all the way through high school. I love baseball. My dad played baseball. I had a brief college stint with a junior college. My dad did. So I mean, it was our thing. He worked a lot, but we'd play catch. We would do that daily, and things like that. That was kind of how we hung out. And I enjoyed it. To be honest with you, I played travel soccer growing up my entire life until I sophomore year in high school. I was injured. That kind of had to cease. My travel soccer career, actually my soccer career in general, ceased because I couldn't get back on the field. Then baseball kind of took over. I didn't change anything. It was just it became more the forefront. I had it in my mind. I possibly could play soccer in college, maybe probably at a lower level. But still I had that idea that I wanted to continue that. And once that ended, it was more of a focus of baseball.
Yeah, no, are the kids staying connected to soccer? Are you pushing the kids any direction? Are we going soccer? Are we going baseball? What are
Uh,
we doing?
well, I had my son in soccer when he was young, and I pushed him when he was not pushed him, but I
Yeah.
tried to advance him from a rec league to like a semi rec travel league, and he hated the coach and quit within a year. And I'm like, damn. But my daughter plays all year round. I mean, she's pretty much on a soccer field about 4 or 5, 6 days a week, which gives me a little bit of fear. She's not very diverse yet, but I'm hoping as she grows up, she'll try some other sports. But I definitely get to enjoy the game through her.
I was going to say
So
you're keeping that connection alive, which I think is exciting, of someone
yeah.
who lost their soccer career as a sophomore in high school. But
Yeah.
we're going to dive into that baseball career of yours, and talking about your time. But what was that path to ISU for you? That was your big your stepping stone to what you're doing before we get into your CICL prospect league and then the MLB career. Moving to ISU, what was that journey like to get there? That recruiting time, and why did you eventually choose ISU?
Um, I got pretty fortunate, to be honest with you. There's been a lot of steps in my career that I've been lucky that I've kind of been able been able to navigate some stuff. I mean, I worked at it once I got there, but I was injured. I said in soccer, junior year of baseball wasn't. I was still kind of not back to normal. I broke my leg as my injury, and then I had to have my leg rebroken before my senior year of high school. So baseball wise, my junior year was not anything special. Summer wasn't anything special, and back then it was Legion. It wasn't all the travel baseball we have now is very different. And so I went into my senior year. My coach in high school actually coached in the CICL, and so when and the pitching coach at ISU was coaching in the CICL at the same time. He threw it out there. He goes, "Hey, I got a left-handed pitcher down here. Why don't you come down, take a look at him, see what you think?" So they came down. I pitched against. We were a very, very small school, as I mentioned. I pitched against O'Fallon High School, which is one of the bigger schools down there. Ended up losing the game, I think, a couple runs. I pitched pretty well, but after that, they enjoyed what they saw. They invited me up to ISU for a recruiting trip. Um, I enjoyed the campus, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't have a whole lot of other opportunities. Division One at that point, they were pretty much the only one. There were a couple Division Twos, NAIA, but I enjoyed the people I was around. I enjoyed the opportunity that I didn't want to pass up a Division One opportunity, and it felt good. I mean, being from a smaller school, ISU wasn't huge. It was, I mean, compared to going to an Ohio State or I don't know,
Yeah.
U of I. It feels it's a moderately sized school, so it had a nice fit, and it ended up being a very good fit for me
I was gonna say,
academically, athletically, personally, and
yeah.
everything really worked out.
I think it worked out for both parties to be able to do what you were able to do at ISU, but ISU took you to the CICL and where we are today. So our predecessor here in the Prospect League was the CICL. And as we go through and I look at, who I want to talk to and what kind of players I bring into this podcast, you really stood up to me because you spent 2 years in the CICL. You were 2 years with Quincy. Take me through how you initially made it on that Quincy roster for the Quincy Gems in 99 and then why you came back in 2000.
I believe I could be mistaken, but I would imagine I would probably. I don't know if I would had that opportunity right at the beginning of my starting when I
Mhm.
got there in the fall. I'm not sure that was going to be like my destination. Just I came in. I came in with a lot of guy. I was the only guy from Southern Illinois. Everybody else was from Chicago. Had some pretty highly touted pitchers that I came in with some pretty highly credentialed, high school careers and big schools, and so I got going. I didn't start my freshman year to start with for the first few weeks. I ended up pitching pretty well where I was, and then next thing you know, I was in the starting rotation. And back then in the Missouri Valley, we played 4 game series, so it was a little bit different than it is now. Sundays seemed to be like if you could find somebody to manage a game, you were going to be on a good because they would look like football scores sometimes.
Yep.
So that job ended up being mine. I was able to be a Sunday starter for my freshman year, and I got a lot of experience that way. And I think that helped promote me being able to go to the CICL and being able to pitch there because I'm not sure if I would. My guess would be I wasn't slated to go there right off the bat just without the experience. Um, and coming into ISU is kind of just another guy, not definitely probably not on their prospect list. I don't know. It would be a
Yeah.
good. I've never asked the question of where I stood when I came in as a
Yeah.
freshman. The thoughts of it.
And then, getting to Quincy though, as you are there in Quincy, what was your time like in Quincy? Is that fond memories for you down there with the Gems for 2 seasons? What do you remember down there with Quincy? And, what did you take away from those experiences?
I mean, the experiences down there was great. I mean, I had an awesome host family. The Nottinghams. I'm not sure if they still live there, but I mean, we were close enough that they had daughters that were younger than I was at the time. I'm trying to think; they might have been like 10 and 12 when we were there, and now they're like married, have kids, and everything. So, and we've kept in touch over the years. Even my family or my parents and them. Great host family. Um, the experience, the ballpark. I mean, we were the only at that time. I'm not sure how the league is
Yep.
now in terms of stadiums, but at that time, we were drawing what 2 to 3,000, maybe 4,000 people. Games were televised, after the fact, and I mean all these things that you didn't get from every like going to Decatur or Danville. I mean that stuff just didn't happen. So it felt like you were in the best spot in the town, kind of.
Mm.
And the other aspect is just meeting people from everywhere. They brought in at that time. I don't know how their roster is made up now. I haven't looked at it too much or how the league's made up exactly. But we had a lot of talent. We drew guys from a lot of big schools, SEC schools from the South, and they would come up and play. So it was good because you always got a different perspective of how other players treated the game or how they prepared for the game, and so you can learn from other guys too.
Yeah, and talking about that host family and too, it's a fun thing to talk about. Did you stay connected with your host family post your time there? I know a lot of MLB players have that story of they remember the first time their host family came and watched their one of their first games. Do you have any experiences like that?
Yeah. We definitely stayed connected. I mean, it was good. We would see them. Oh man, I'm trying to think. They obviously St. Louis was close, but I know they were out in Kansas City, I believe, once to watch me play. They were different. I don't know how many times they saw me play, but it was definitely a decent amount when they would be on time and their travel and their kids' lives. But it was fun to stay connected. It was a good experience. I mean, I don't know if they all end up like mine. I
Right.
mean, it was we were close knit. They truly, genuinely wanted to make life as best as they can for you for the summer for an 18 to 20-year-old kid that's we're learning to live on their own, kind of.
Right. And I think the host family experience ranges, and that's why I asked that question to the alumni that joined me, because your host family experience can range from something very simple to something in this stratosphere that we see pretty often is host families get an invite to a player's wedding after they've moved
Yeah.
on. And so it's the connection you build from, to second family to some people. So it's good to see a lot of those connections are still living, and a lot of those connections continued with players past the league. But going back into kind of the baseball roots of what you did in Quincy in the CICL, do you feel like your time in the CICL helped you at ISU at all? Do you feel like what you were able to build on in the summer helped you develop towards what you were able to produce high level seasons at ISU?
Yeah, I think anytime I still I think adding innings and developing, there's sometimes you go out, you face the not a all-star lineup, but I mean, you sometimes you face like a little deeper lineup through summer ball than you would during the season. Granted, we were using wood, so it was a little bit different. So it's probably more sided towards the pitcher's liking, but there's some benefits of it too. You learn to throw the ball inside, which you need to do anyway with the metal bats, even when we were back then. But it can build the confidence because you all of a sudden you see outs, you get inside, working inside on the batters. You can build confidence going through that. I thought it definitely built you know stamina in terms of continuing as maybe not going into the ISU season for the next 2 years, but when I got into a professional season, when I finished my 100 innings at ISU, and then I'm going into a professional season where you're going to a short season and now you're getting paid and you need to produce. All right. And it's real life now. It's fun, but this is your career now. So I think that's a stepping stone. It kind of gave you, I mean, I would go and get 150, 160 innings a year, which is great when I kept going. I think that really benefited me.
Yeah, and talking about that development, you were able to pick that up and get we talk about that minor league level experience at that prospect league and CICI level with everything that we're doing there. And your development in the minors was, I wouldn't say fast track, but it was a speed. You got drafted in '01, you were traded to the White Sox 2002, and by 2003 you're on the major league roster. Take me through that experience for you and how, your prior experiences helped you navigate that. But just in general, what was your experience like being able to move that quickly and finally, making it to the majors?
Yeah, well, going back to my time in Quincy, I mean, this is fine. I mean, I did live but living on your own, being away from home. I know I'm 2 hours away from home. It's not like I'm a big deal away from home. But I mean, when I got drafted and I left, I flew me out to Vancouver, halfway across this country. And, I mean, this helping, granted, I'm living with another family at that time, but I mean, it's still kind of on your own, learn to navigate everything. We had to have a job in Quincy. So we'd have our job, we'd do our job in the morning, prepare somehow in the weight room, and then we would kind of go out and play our game that evening. It seemed like every day. And so that kind of got me ready for, the professional end of it. When I went to Vancouver, went to a host family the same way up there because it's a little expensive to rent
Yeah.
places in Vancouver for having a rookie ball team there. But went up there and it was different just because as I don't know how in my mind, pro ball sometimes can take a different path than like a college experience or a summer league experience because I mean, as I mentioned earlier, everybody's there trying to better themselves personally because we're trying to move up the ladder. We're trying to get to the ultimate goal of getting to the big leagues, along with trying to make the team good and do good on the team and have a prosperous season. Because everybody, it's fun to win, so it
Yeah.
makes life a lot better for
Yeah.
everybody else if we're winning. So, that aspect of professional baseball, there's like a balancing act that you don't see always balanced with everybody. Put it that way, I guess you could say. Nice
Yeah.
way to
And
put it.
And I absolutely, and I think that's what, everyone strives for at every level of baseball is figuring out that balancing act of how everyone can figure out how to be successful and develop, but also get wins because that's what everyone loves to do is win a baseball game. But like I said, you're moving up and by 2003, you're pitching for the White Sox. 2004, you're a regular kind of there. In 2005 season, that's your big season with the White Sox. World Series champion. That's a big one. And I'm going to tell you straight up, we're going to have White Sox fans listening. Our biggest draw to this podcast with being you is going to be White Sox fans. So take me through your experience that 2005 season, your phenomenal season coming out of the bullpen, and then what winning a World Series was like with the White Sox in 2005.
Well, yeah, it was unbelievable. I'll tell you what, I got traded over there in 03 on kind of the back end of a deal. I mean, I remember to the day, I was like, I'm trying to think what I was doing. I was like packing my car to go see my parents or something. I was living in Chicago or somewhere. I don't know where I was. No, I don't know where I was.
You ended up in Chicago. That's where,
yeah,
that's
I
where
ended
the
up
story
there.
ends.
All I know is I got a message like, oh, by the way, you got traded. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I ended up being the back end of a deal with Billy Koch and Keith Falk and Mark Johnson. So I got there, life was a little bit different. I got invited to big league spring training my first year, which was eye-opening to say the least. You walk into a clubhouse to some guys that, you watched on TV, some guys that have 15, 20 years of experience, doing the daily grind. So you got to see that. You got to see how that operated. That was eye-opening. Spent about 3 weeks there, and they sent me back and went back to minor league camp, which was where I deserved to be. Then I went in 02. I got to play for Wally Backman in Birmingham, which was I'll tell you what, if he was fun to play for, and I learned a lot. I mean, if there's anything I took away from it is how hard the expectations were, like, to play hard. You play hard, you do your job. He was your best friend, and he would pull for you as much as he could, and vice versa, if you weren't there. So that I ended up getting called up that year for a little stint, had a few starts, struggled mightily in my last one, and then I went back. I went back down, and the following year I threw well in spring training. It was kind of a decision. I don't know if it was ultimately my decision. I know they brought it up to me, but they're like, you can go in the bullpen or you can go down and start in AAA. And my opinion was I'll go to the bullpen and learn. And I learned. I took a lot of lumps. I had some really rough games. I had some decent games, and then I just remember I was about 2 months into my rookie year in 04, and we were a decent team. We were around 500, I would say. And it was myself and the other rookie was John Atkins. We both made the team that year. He was a little bit older than me. We ended up being roommates in Chicago that year. And there were times where, ugly games we got into, and there was an interview, and I don't know what reporter asked the question, but they asked Ozzy. They said, "Are these Neal and John?" I don't know. It was just specifically myself or both of us.
Yep.
Are they gonna be moved? Are they? I gave up 4 runs that day or something like that.
Right.
And Ozzy bluntly told them, they're like, "Get used to it. They're going to be here all year." He goes, "They pitch games that aren't close right now, and they're going to learn." And from that day forward, it was definitely very relaxing for my to understand that, oh, my manager has my back. We're going to try to fix this, and try to get better and learn at the highest level, which is not easy. So that was definitely a nice feeling that your manager had your back. So that was one moment my rookie year that really stood out to me. Then we got to 05, and 05 was magical to say the least. I mean, it was we started out hot. I'll tell you what, we had some of the best starting pitching. If we were the best starting pitching staff the entire year, I would say. And I want to say there was I don't know the statistic, but I have a feeling at the beginning of the year there was some odd role we had on where we had the lead in like 20 straight games or something like that. We might not have held it the whole time, but that's how we were. We scored first, we got on teams, and we shut them down for the entire stint. So I mean, it started off really hot that year, and then transitioned a little bit in the middle because Dustin Hermanson went down, and then Bobby Jinks came up, and it was a different role for everybody, a little different role. Obviously, you know what Bobby did. He was excellent, throwing 100
Yeah.
miles an hour when nobody else was doing it back then. It was pretty fun to watch, because now it seems like everybody has a guy that throws 100. But back then, if you saw above 95, it was considered pretty hard. And near the end of that season, we had a little lull where I'm trying to think, it was trying Minnesota or Detroit, or somebody was kind of nearing us. I know that. I don't know if it got down to a few games here or there, and then all of a sudden we kind of pushed through it near the end. I want to say it's probably Minnesota. I would guess.
Cleveland ended up finishing second right behind you. So I think it was Cleveland. They had 93 wins.
It
You had
was
99.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it was Cleveland. They did narrow it. We had a huge lead at one point.
I was gonna say, and you guys started off hot. You say that, and I'm immediately clicking. I'm like, all right, well, let's see what you can find here. So you guys were really hot, 17-7 in April. You only had one losing month the whole year, and it was August. You went 12-16. Otherwise, you were above 500 the whole time. 17-7 in April, 18-10 in May, and 18-7 in June. Like, that's just a ridiculous start to the season.
I was gonna say, I knew it was good. I remember August, because I remember everybody's like, oh boy, are they going to hold on? Because we obviously went out, and I would assume Cleveland was winning through August, and why we were losing. And so, yeah, well, it was a heck of a run. I'll tell you what, it was a team, because we had a few new people on the roster, and you look back, and that was a heck of a lineup, heck of a starting staff, and I mean, the bullpen, we did our job. But as I've always said, a bullpen's really hard. Nowadays they're constructed a little bit differently, because they do have quite a few long men. They kind of bridge it sometimes, with starters not going as long these days. But back then, the starters were expected to go 7-8 innings every start. And I'll tell you what, between Garland, Burley, Contreras, Freddie Garcia, Paducah, they all did it. I mean, it was almost expected. You weren't really on high alert till 5-6 inning, if any. So
yeah, and your 2005 season, to focus, you keep going to teammates and stuff, and I'm going to focus selfishly on yourself, was just fantastic what you did during that 2005 season. But that was when really came into your own. Like you said, you talk into the bullpen, you're talking about what you're getting in there, and that's really where you found your niche in the league, and it's what many people know you as, is what you did out of the bullpen that year. But just that phenomenal 1.94 ERA, all those innings pitched, and figuring out, you talk about your place, that was Major League Baseball kind of left. You got to go 3, you got to go whole inning, you got to go 3 outs, but you were known for that guy who was going to get that lefty out. How do you feel you took on that role and embraced it through your time in the MLB, knowing that your job was coming out of the bullpen and doing what you had to do in whatever situation it was going to be?
I think the first year was definitely a learning experience, and learning what other people did, like, to prepare. It's so hard, because you're like, how do you prepare? Do you want to do too much, too little? How much do you want to know about a hitter? How much? And it was the up and downs the first year, where you weren't exactly sure how to go about it. The second year, I kind of dumbed everything down. The first year, I threw a curveball, I threw a changeup more often. The second year I came in, I learned a cutter. Burley threw a cutter, so I learned a cutter, and I ended up going predominantly. I pretty much threw 2 pitches that entire year. I threw a fastball, I threw a cutter, slash slider. I could expand on it a little bit, but that's how I attacked hitters the entire year. And it'd probably be interesting how many times I actually threw on the arm side part of the plate for me, like into a lefty or away to a righty. It probably would be pretty staggering numbers. I guarantee I threw pretty much cutters and fastballs to my glove side the entire year, and it worked. Eventually, people caught on, but for that year, it worked. And I attribute I've had AJ as a catcher that year. I had AJ as a catcher later on in Texas, and I attribute it to him, because he knows exactly. He does a really, really good job knowing the hitters and knowing his pitcher, how the hitters attack him, in my mind. And I've always had a lot of trust in him, and I gained it that year, because I mean, I never shook him off. He always it seemed like everything he put down was working. Everything, he kept me where I needed to be the entire year, whether it was get on me or, you know, push me along or however it had to go. But that was kind of how that year portrayed. It was, you know, I found the cutter. I was I got in a good role. You know, Marte had a stint where he was hurt or down, and I kind of stepped into a later inning role, and it kind of took off from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And really finding what you're going to do out of the bullpen. And, looking at, I could go to looking at your MLB career as a whole and we could talk about that. But, the way that you talk, I'm thinking, of those moments, your favorite experiences of what you look at when you think about your MLB career as a whole and you think about all the things that you did throughout your MLB career. What stands out to you of this guy that you faced a bunch that you knew when you got on the mound that you felt like you were confident that you were going to get him out? That guy when you were in that lefty matchup, or just your favorite experience? What is one thing you take away from your career that you're pretty proud of what you were able to do?
Um, you know, the biggest thing for me, I mean, we can talk about a couple of hitters because
Yeah. I was going to
there are
say,
a
I know
lot of
you got a
guys
few.
that probably there was probably a lot of guys, a lot more guys that are like, oh, good, he's coming in. So
Yeah.
but we're gonna feel confident too.
But
But
we're
I was
going to
pretty
go on your
successful.
end of that and we're going to go, who do you feel confident with?
I
Yeah.
was pretty successful against Grady Sizemore when I was younger.
Yep.
David Ortiz, I had a good track record, although he hit a game-winning bomb off me. I think the last time I freaking faced him. But before that, I had his number, which was, you know, good
And
hitter, really
that's
good
a good
hitter.
one to have a number of. So
That's a good hitter that I was confident about facing. But the biggest thing with in terms of my career, and you talk about like moments in my career, is coming back from my hip injuries and getting back to the big league field. Because I was out 3 years, almost 2.5 years after Tommy John. I had 4 hip surgeries, just kind of a mess. And you know what? I thought I was going to get back into it right away. I was signed by the Yankees right after all this happened. I go into spring training. I legitimately put the pair of pants on for like 30 minutes, and I get called in, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to do an MRI on your hip." And I'm
yeah.
like, "Oh shoot!" And so the next day they call me in, and they're like, "Yeah, we're going to release you." I'm like, "Dang." I didn't even. I went down there 2 weeks early to throw too, and I was throwing for them and all the stuff on the minor league side. And so I was like, got released, and I'm like, "Oh shoot!" So I go home, you know, thinking this is going to be easy. You know, I'm gonna find another team. You know, I was signed this spring, didn't find a job at all, so I just kind of stayed healthy all year, throwing, doing whatever. Get back into the next year, getting closer to 2012. Excuse me. I can't I can't find a job still, and I'm calling everywhere. Or my agent's calling everywhere. I'm throwing for guys, and you know I'm never. I don't think I've ever been a guy that I go into like a bullpen. You see these bullpens on YouTube and these guys throwing at these different facilities. I don't think I've ever been a guy that just goes out there and I'm going to light up a radar gun and it's going to be and your ball's going to move like this and everybody's going to think it's crazy. So they'd see me throw and they're like, oh, it looks normal. And finally, couldn't get signed still, but because my medical records were
Yep.
yay
Yeah.
big. I finally, my agent luckily had represented at the time Profar, and he was the number one prospect in all of baseball, I believe, at that time, but for the Rangers for sure. And he called the Rangers, gave him a call. Luckily, they answered the call because he was his agent, so they probably wanted to keep him
Yep.
happy. So, but they came and saw me, and it was you know their I think it was their cross checker or something who's seen me since college, knew each other. And he's like, you look the same. He goes, I'm going to put a call in. He goes, we have another guy with a bad hip. I think we can, you know, navigate around this. The next thing you know, they're like, we're gonna offer you a minor league um, you know, just bring you to the minor leagues, see what happens. Next thing you know, I was in the minor league camp, and you know, I um, I got down there. I threw pretty well. I ended up getting hurt again with my lat, but I ended up throwing for the big league side a little bit. Got moved over here and there, and then I finished up in AAA that year, and I was a little fearful because I mean I only threw a couple innings because I tore my lat. And I was fearful they weren't going to offer me a contract for the next year, but they brought me back. And I had an awful spring. They sent me to AAA, and I ended up putting together a better year that year than I did in '05. I had
Yeah,
one of the best years of my. If you put the numbers together in AAA, I know it's AAA and big leagues, it's not the same, but
professional
the
baseball.
entire the entire year was one of the best years I've had. And the moment I got called, I don't know how many months I put down in the minors that year, a month and a half, but that call, when they called me up, was pretty special because it took three like not grueling years. I mean, I had some big league time. I had a family. I had money. I mean,
Yeah.
all the little things were fine. So it's not like I was, but it was a lot of hard work I needed to put in to get back to where I ultimately wanted to be, and know that I could still do it, or try to still do it. So that was like the best moment of my career on a personal level.
Yeah, absolutely. That 2013 years, that other, really good year that stands out for you in what you were able to do. But just as many people will say, a pretty outstanding, big league career and everything you were able to do. And it's from your time and what you were able to build on and what you were able to do. So looking back as a whole, some really fun things to look at. But I'm going to dive into just a few more questions for you. Kind of what you're up to these days. You're a part of the developmental games with the Slammers Training Academy. How do you view the importance of player development throughout, high school players, college players' career, and how do you think summer baseball can play a key role in that development? Going back to what you knew from your time in the CICL, what you've been able to observe and see, but just from your experience in developing players with your Slammers Training Academy.
I def- so going through the younger ages. I mean, we developed the baseball end of it. We have trying to put together some winning teams and develop some kids, and we have quite a few teams. We have 21 teams now this year, and so that's quite a few players. So we have some players at some different levels. There's the top teams on all the age groups are pretty solid, and we work down for some kids that who knows they're going to blossom at maybe a different time. And a lot of the as I've navigated through 12, 13U, 14U, as I'm at now with my son, is a lot of the differences. There are some skills differences, but some of the differences is just the physical nature. Some kids grow dramatically quicker than others, and then some catch up. And by the end of high school, everybody's kind of where they're at, whether they're going to be big physical kid or fast guy, or how it's going. But with our program, we put together some solid teams. We try to really instill these kids, whether yes, we'd like them all to go to college and play baseball and further their career if they would desire to. But we would like to add other aspects to their life where they're learning some accountability. They're learning to take care of things themselves, where when they're stepping into college, whether it is just going for baseball or whether they're going to ISU or University of Illinois to go get a business degree or broadcasting degree,
Mm.
or whatever their aspirations are, that they're gonna come out of this after how many ever years they're with our program, that they're gonna have a good base to go about their lives, whether it's in the baseball aspect or something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the tunnel vision of what we do, here at the Prospect League, and I think the way that you speak is kind of, I think you would enjoy, what we've been able to do in the past few years and been able to build here at the Prospect League. But just from your time in the CICL and our predecessor, just to the time of your experience, other stuff, do you think summer college baseball is important? And if you do, why to fans, to players, do you think it's important? Not so much to me. You don't have to sell it to me. I get it, or I believe it
Yeah,
is, but to fans, to players, why do you think they should?
I think there's more to it than just the baseball. I think the baseball part of it's great. Um, I think I think pitchers need to throw more. I think that's how you learn. I think you learn how to pitch by actually facing hitters and developing that part of the game. I don't think it's. I think there's areas for lessons and bullpens and all this stuff, and there's definitely room for, the improvement on the side of, taking a couple months and trying to develop something. But I think you learn how to compete and pitch by doing it physically on a mound. As you see, there's some guys in the big leagues and you don't see a ton of it, but you see guys that have stuff that you would not ever scout or ever like say this is the guy that's going to be 10 years in the big leagues. But next thing you know, they know how to get people out. They know how to pitch. They know how to do those things. And that's where you're going to learn it. You're not going to learn it doing it by yourself, throwing into a net, all right, with nobody hitting. On the other aspect of it, I just think the summer game, you're going away, you're going to meet, I don't know, you probably go with a couple guys from your school, but then you're going to be with 20 other guys from different schools. That's how minor league baseball kind of is. And you know what, if your aspirations are to, get into the professional end of it, you're going to have to figure out a way to get along with everybody and be a good teammate. And that's how it's going to be until you're done playing, because there's guys from every aspect of life in all of these teams. And that's what the fun part about it. You get to know so many different guys. You get a different manager. You get, it seems like pretty good crowds in some of these facilities. So that's the part of it that would be the selling point for me. I haven't been home since I was 18 years old. That was the last summer I think I spent at home when I was playing. And there were some of the best experiences of my life, going through that.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from all of this is we're going to have to get you out to a prospect league game pretty soon here, so you can experience
There you go.
what it's like these days. I got two more questions for you, and I think they're just little fun ones to wrap up on. Talking about baseball mementos is one of the favorite things that people love to talk about. What's your favorite baseball memento from your career? Do you have a ball that you sit in your trophy case that you remember? You got that World Series ring, of course. What is? I'll give you an example. I thought Warren Morris's favorite memento is going to be his gold or his bronze medal. It wasn't. It's the ball that the guy gave him and he hit his home run. He needs to get the bat and the ball, but it's that ball that's pretty special to him from that home run. So, what to you is that special thing, or what is one of your favorite, mementos?
You know what? I got a ball I got one hit in the big leagues accidentally. I do have that ball and I was 1 for 2, struck out the next time, but somehow I got a double.
There's a hit. Oh, a double too.
in Montreal before they closed it down. Yeah. So that just
special.
proves how long ago it was. It was like the old turf and stuff like that. It was definitely different. So I definitely have that ball. So that means, and then I should have kept the strikeout one too, so add both of them. But that guy was throwing a lot harder than the first guy. Yeah. I didn't have much of a chance. But yeah, I was a reliever the whole time. American League, I didn't have many opportunities to take at bats. But my second at bat, I do remember, because I was pitching, we were getting killed by Baltimore with the Cubs. Lou Piniella comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, kid." He called everybody kid.
I was like, that's how Lou Piniella talked, because he said, "Hey, kid."
He's like, "Hey, kid." He goes, "Why don't you go hit?" And I'm like, "Oh," I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, you're gonna go pitch the next inning too." And I'm like, he goes, "Am I gonna ruin your batting average?" I looked out there and it was Jim Johnson, the big 6'6" guy, 6'7", whatever he was, from Baltimore at the time. And I used upper 90s, and I looked out. I was like, "There's a really good shot." I said, "I'm batting 1,000, Lou." He's like, "Well, you'll be batting 500 in a little bit. Don't worry." And I went up. I actually fouled one ball off, which I probably almost went in our dugout. But that was my successful, against him. And then I was like, he looked so close. He looked like he was like 2 feet away from me throwing. Right. I was just hoping to God he didn't hit me, because I would have been out.
You survived it. You survived it. So. And then last question for you, it's one of my favorites, is that baseball field of dreams. What is your favorite ballpark to take in a game, to watch a game, to play in a game? From your long career to even the minors to the college, what is that one place that you love to play in? And then what is a favorite place of you that you like to take in a game as well?
My favorite place when I was playing to go to, which I don't know. It's probably not many people. So you never know. But it's Seattle. I don't know. I really like Seattle. I like the when King Felix was pitching, the crowds were good.
Yep.
Now it seems like they're getting quite a bit more people in there. But at that point in time, it was when he was pitching, the crowds were pretty good. Other than that, it was hit or miss. But I love the field. I love the city. You know, the weather. I mean, it was always. I just enjoyed everything about being out in that part of the country. If I was going to selfishly go watch a baseball game, I'm a huge Cardinals fan, so it's hard not to embrace Busch Stadium and think that they have probably some of the best fans. That I don't know that I'm biased, but I believe they have some of the best fans there are.
Very good place to take in a game. We love Bush and all of our prospect league connections, but selfishly, probably wish you would have thrown a game for the Cardinals at some point if you're a big Cardinal fan. But you got it from the other side. You felt that rivalry and the Cubs side of things. So
yeah, no, I was hoping. I was hoping near the end of my career I could just. I mean, even because I spent the last 2 years in the minor leagues,
yep.
jumping around one year and then my last year with Washington. I was hoping that maybe it would pop up, even to go to spring training with them, and that would have been kind of a dream scenario to try to get up with them. And then we almost played them in the World Series. I mean, there was a possibility we could have played them in the World Series, but I did get my stint pitching in St. Louis, via the Cubs, and the Rangers. We went there actually when I was with the Rangers. So I did get to pitch at least at Busch Stadium, just not for the hometown I grew up watching.
Not for the Southern Illinois kid who is a big Cardinal fan even at this point. But I want to thank you for your time on the Prospect League podcast. This was really fun. Neal Cotts, I think I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you did as well. And I think the fans will enjoy it as well. So thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Had a blast. Thank you.
Thanks again to Neal Cotts for joining me today on the Prospect League podcast. I really enjoyed that interview with Neal Cotts. A little different perspective than what we have heard in the most recent episodes of the Prospect League podcast. Neal had a really good time in his time with the Quincy Gems in the CICL, but a long major league career, lots of success, up and downs in his career, through injury, through triumph, through a World Series championship. So really good stuff from Neal Cotts, and good to see he's still connected to the game of baseball as well. And the same thing I said to our last guest, I'll say again to Neal. I hope he takes up my offer and comes out to a Prospect League game this year, because I really enjoy our alumni enjoying. They have been willing to come back and join me on the Prospect League podcast, so I hope they can continue to dip their toes back into their former land of summer dreams that they played here in the Prospect League and the CICL. Before we wrap up this week's episode, let's get to what we always do, and let's talk about 3 things you need to know that's happening right now in the Prospect League. We're continuing to do our 60 years of baseball celebration here in the Prospect League. We're doing that countdown until opening day with 60 days of baseball, and we're highlighting a former Prospect League player or coach or whoever has been excited enough to be a part of the Prospect League over their career. We're highlighting them on social media right now, so you can check out all those on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at our Prospect League social media channels. We have more exciting ones coming this week as we continue to move closer to the present day, as we're in the 90s and early 2000s now, the 1990s, and we see some really exciting players that some of the younger generation might know as well now, as we're going to see Ryan Howard, Jonathan Papelbon, and Ben Zobrist this week, just among the few that we're rolling out. Some exciting alumni that we're highlighting this week, so check that out on our social media channels. MLB's Mexico City series took place this weekend, and if you check that out, you might have saw 2 former Prospect League alumni there, as 2011 Dubas County Bombers Sean Manaea pitched for the Giants, as well as 2009 Danville Dan's Austin Nola was a part of the Padres as a catcher there for them as well. So if you checked out that series, we saw 2 former Prospect League alumni there. Really some exciting alumni exposure there, and I wanted to highlight that. You probably can go back and look at it somewhere, but just some exciting news of what just recently happened in the Prospect League world, of our alumni playing in some really exciting games there. And lastly, all 17 teams in the Prospect League continue to roll out their rosters for this year. Player announcements are continuing to happen on social media across the Prospect League, so check out each individual team's Prospect League social media channels: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Everybody's there. We got the YouTube, we got it all, and those websites. So check out those websites. Truthfully, if you go to prospectleague.com prospectleague.com, and you head to that top bar. Every team's website is featured there with their social media links on their website. So check out the player announcements that are continuing to be rolled out in the Prospect League as those rosters are continuing to come along and they're continuing to get announced. And soon enough, you'll really be able to access them on prospectleague.com as well. You can see some portions of rosters there right now, but make sure you're checking out all of that as we approach the season and get all of that ready with schedules. They're already out. They've been out for a while, so if you're getting ready in that sense, but rosters are continuing to be unveiled, so check those out on the social media channels. But that is all I have this week on the Prospect League podcast. That concludes this week's episode. More exciting interviews are coming your way, so please continue to support this podcast by liking, subscribing, and commenting on wherever podcast platform you're on. Remember to use those comments on YouTube specifically to tell me what you want to hear, what you want me to cover, and who you want me to talk to, but continue to support the Prospect League podcast so I can continue to do this with you every few weeks when we get to the season every week. So until next time, I'm Lucas Burris, signing off on the Prospect League podcast.